The autumn wind swept across the livestock auction yard, carrying the scent of hay and resignation. The day was nearly done, and most trailers were already packed with the best cattle and sleek horses that had brought high bids. What remained were the forgotten ones, animals too old, too thin, or too broken for anyone to see value in. In a corner pen, a mare stood alone. Her ribs cast long shadows in the fading afternoon sun. Once shining coat hung in dull patches, her head drooping with years of neglect. The auctioneer barely paused as he reached her lot, his voice tired. $25, he called, uninterested. Silence followed. He shrugged, ready to move on. That was when Isabel Martinez, a single mother who worked nights cleaning offices, raised her hand. Heads turned. She wore a faded jacket and boots worn thin by years of hard use, hardly the image of someone who could afford a horse, especially not a horse that looked ready to collapse. But something in the mare's eyes had reached her, something that whispered of shared burdens and silent endurance. The bidding closed almost instantly. Isabel counted out 25 crumpled bills, and the auctioneer shook his head as though she'd just wasted money she didn't have. Loading the mare into a borrowed trailer was harder than buying her. The animal moved cautiously, every step deliberate, as though sudden movement might bring pain. Isabel spoke softly, coaxing with the patience of a woman who had guided her stubborn 12-year-old son through countless challenges. The mare's hooves scraped against the trailer floor as she stepped inside. There was no fight, no panic, only weary resignation. Isabel closed the trailer door with trembling hands. Not from cold, but from the weight of what she had just done. She had spent money she couldn't spare on a responsibility she wasn't sure she could handle. The drive home took her through the town of Millbrook, a place where empty storefronts spoke louder than words. 3 years earlier, the local factory had shut down, taking with it jobs that had supported families for generations. What remained was survival people stretching every dollar, clinging to stubborn hope. The hardware store now sold more lottery tickets than tools. The diner's coffee grew weaker every month. Even the elementary school had cut art and music. Life had become about getting by, not about thriving. Isabel's small ranch on the outskirts was her anchor. 10 acres of scrubland, a leaking barn and sagging fence, but it was hers, bought with the life insurance money after her husband's accident. Every morning for 5 years, she had walked its boundaries, making sure her few chickens stayed safe, reminding herself that survival was still possible. Waiting at the fence was her son Mateo, his school backpack still on his shoulders. His expression was wary, his dark eyes carrying a weight too heavy for a boy his age. He had learned not to expect much from life. When the trailer door opened, the mare stepped down carefully, her nostrils flaring as she tested the new ground. Mateo approached slowly, palm up, in a gesture of peace. And then something remarkable happened. The mare, who had flinched at every touch in the auction yard, lowered her head and breathed softly into the boy's palm. For a moment, it was as if 2 weary souls recognized each other. Mateo's face lit with a smile so genuine it startled his mother. It was the first real smile she had seen from him in months. Isabel named the mare Esperanza, Spanish for hope. The local veterinarian examined Esperanza and shook his head. Malnutrition, old injuries, exhaustion etched into every muscle. She's 20, maybe older. You'd be doing her a kindness if you put her down, he said gently, even offering to do it for free. But Isabel refused. Too many people had written her and Mateo off after her husband's death. Too many had said she couldn't raise a child alone. She would not discard this horse. And so began the slow work of healing. Isabel mixed grain with rice bran to help Esperanza gain weight. Each evening, while Mateo did his homework, Isabel brushed the mare's tangled mane. Over time, it became a ritual for all 3. Isabel found comfort in the rhythm of care. Mateo read aloud from his assignments, and Esperanza slowly began to trust that human hands could bring gentleness instead of pain. The mare's progress was agonizingly slow. Some nights Isabel cried, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. But then Esperanza would nick her softly when she saw Mateo, or lean into Isabel's brushing, and she knew they were all healing together. It was during the 3rd week that Esperanza revealed something extraordinary. Mateo had been practicing for the school's annual fundraising fair. His class was expected to perform traditional folk dances, but the boy had no money for lessons. Instead, he stumbled through steps he learned from videos, his feet kicking up dust in the yard. Isabel watched from the porch, encouraging him gently. Esperanza grazed nearby, but soon Isabel noticed the mare moving in rhythm with the music drifting from Mateo's phone. She lifted her feet in time, arched her neck with crescendos, and even paused during quiet moments. At first, Isabel thought it was coincidence. But, as days passed, Esperanza's movements grew deliberate. When Mateo realized it, his joy was indescribable. He began practicing with Esperanza, and the bond between them deepened. News travels fast in small towns. Soon neighbors gathered to watch the boy and his horse dance. Skeptics became believers as they saw the thin, discarded mare, moving with grace beside a 12-year-old boy, whose face glowed with pride. The local newspaper ran a story with photos. The dancing horse of Millbrook. Regional outlets picked it up. Social media spread it further. Visitors began arriving, first locals, then strangers from out of town. They brought cameras, children, and hope. Isabel reluctantly charged a small admission fee to keep up with the cost of feed and care. To her surprise, the income allowed her to cut back on night cleaning shifts and spend more time at home. Even more surprising was the effect on the town. Visitors lingered in Millbrook, buying coffee, browsing antique shops, and filling the gas station. Businesses that had been weeks from closing suddenly saw life again. For many, Esperanza became more than a dancing horse. She was proof that beauty could emerge from brokenness, that value could exist where no one expected it. Mateo blossomed too. Once quiet and withdrawn, he found confidence in performing with his horse. He stood taller, laughed more, and discovered his own worth. But Isabel worried. Attention was fickle. What if it faded? What if Esperanza grew too old, too tired? Could they carry the weight of a town's hopes? The real trial came with a brutal December ice storm. Power lines fell. Families shivered in dark homes. Isabel feared no one would come anymore, that the miracle was over. But on the first clear day, cars appeared. Neighbors and strangers alike bundled in coats, carrying thermoses of hot drinks ready to share. They didn't come just for entertainment. They came because Esperanza had taught them resilience. That morning's performance was quiet, almost sacred. Esperanza moved carefully across the frost-dusted ground, Mateo matching her steps with a grace beyond his years. The audience watched in reverent silence, their breath steaming in the cold. When Esperanza nuzzled Mateo's shoulder at the end, the applause carried a warmth that defied winter. As months passed, Millbrook transformed. Artisans sold handmade goods at small markets near Isabel's farm. The coffee shop reopened with extended hours. Local musicians performed on weekends. Even the town council, once preoccupied with decline, now debated growth. Tourists came seeking something authentic. They found it in a boy and his horse who had no reason to be extraordinary, except that they chose not to give up on each other. By summer, a permanent outdoor stage was built so Mateo and Esperanza could perform safely. A visitor center opened, sharing the town's history. The annual festival grew larger than ever, celebrating crafts, music, and resilience. At the center of it all stood a once-forgotten mare and the boy who believed in her. On a warm evening during the festival, Isabel stood at the edge of the performance ring. Hundreds watched as Mateo and Esperanza danced in perfect harmony. Her coat now gleamed with health, his steps confident and proud. Together, they were living proof that $25 spent with compassion could change an entire town. As the sun set, Isabel realized something profound. Esperanza hadn't just saved them, she had saved a community. She had shown that second chances mattered, that hope could ripple outward in ways no one could predict. Mateo had learned his worth wasn't defined by hardship, but by what he chose to give. And Isabel had discovered that sometimes the riskiest choices, the ones made with the heart, brought the greatest rewards. The crowd lingered long after the music ended, reluctant to leave the magic. Children tried their own dance steps in the grass, adults exchanged numbers promising to return, and at the center, a boy and his horse stood quietly bound by trust, proving that miracles are possible when compassion leads the way.